Folks, thank you so much for joining in. There's Heather is here. Hi, Heather. Rocky, hello, hello. Lots of known names, a couple of newer names. Chloe's joined us. Leon is here. Nicholas is here from Montreal. Alex, Rahul, everybody, welcome. All right, so let's do this. There's so much to talk about. Our guest today is the much sort of famed and esteemed in the points and loyalty program world, uh, Forbes Advisor. You know what? I can never even keep a handle on things. So I basically, Caroline, what I did was I went into your LinkedIn and I copied what you call, how you describe yourself. And this is how you describe yourself. So I'm just going to read it out and let's parse some of that out. Uh, Managing editor of credit cards and travel rewards for Forbes Advisor. This is my piece, serious points junkie and a travel nomad. Uh, all of this coexist together? Did one come before the other? By the way, welcome,
Yeah.
Caroline.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here. Always happy to talk travel and points and miles. Yes, one came before the other. Really, the travel piece of it came first. I always loved traveling from when I was a kid, but
Mhm.
we did with my family like normal family trips where we went to Florida and the Caribbean. Like it was nothing
Yeah.
fancy, nothing, never a long trip, like never went anywhere super exotic. Um, but still, I always loved that. I just never really thought that it was going to be possible to travel more than a couple of times per year. So when I was in university, that's kind of where the credit cards, points and miles part of it came in because I was like, oh,
Mm.
I love traveling, but I have no money. How do I still travel? And I started learning about points and miles and because I'm American, I can get all of the great US cards that we have. And back 10 to 15 years ago, before a lot of the rules that exist now existed, it was
Mhm.
kind of a free for all. I was getting like 3 to 4 new cards every 3 months
Mm.
consistently. So it was easy to earn a lot of points really quickly. And then I was able to travel a little bit more than I would have otherwise been able to. And then following that was okay, how do I make this into a lifestyle? Because I
Right.
studied engineering in college. I worked briefly as an engineer after I graduated, but I worked like 50 to 60-hour weeks. I commuted an hour each way every day. I had 10 days per year of paid time off, which included my sick time. So
Mm.
naturally, I was never sick, or I just went to work sick. And I worked in a building with no windows in Michigan, which means in the winter, I never even saw the daylight. I was like, oh no,
The
this is
story has
not.
gone from fun and sunshine to windowless offices. This is
Yeah.
gloomy.
Yeah, I was like, this is not how I want the rest of my life before I retire to look like. So did some soul searching, changed my job a little bit, but still within engineering to at least reduce my commute time, and
Mm.
eventually started doing a little bit of freelance writing. And so that slowly built up, and eventually I started working for Forbes, and I'm now the managing editor covering credit cards and travel rewards. And I've been with Forbes Advisor for about the last 5 years.
Right. And what does that entail in terms of, how did you present yourself to Forbes? Is that a job that just came along in terms of you applied and got through, or did you build that expertise beforehand through a blog, through a website? Like where did Forbes see potential in your expertise to bring you on board? Can you give us a little bit of that? Because from my point of view, we speak to so many people that are so deep into the point stuff, but are doing it more as a hobby thing, but don't always know how and where to formalize that journey if they wanted to do
Mhm.
that. So I want to dig in a little bit in terms of your journey and how did you make that formal shift into writing from being a hobby writer, perhaps, I'm just assuming from being a writer that's writing for hobby to formalizing it through a company like Forbes Advisor. So give us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I did start out as a hobby writer. It was actually the weekend in between the 2 weeks of finals, my senior year of college. I went to the Frequent Traveler University in Washington, D.C. And this is the first trip that I'd ever really booked without like running it by my parents and making sure it was okay. And they would have, if I had run it by them, been like, no, you're not going to some weird conference in between your finals week, like right before you have important finals. But I was just like, no, I'm really interested in this. I need to go. So I went. It was at the Hilton that's in like Tyson's Corner.
Mm,
I rented a car. Like it was really the first big thing that I completely organized all on my own as an adult. And I went and I
mm.
had so much fun. I was like, these are my people. And I came home and I started my blog. My blog was initially called Point Princess.
Ah.
And I was like, this is cool. I've gotten to learn so much and I see so much potential from this travel reward space. And I want to be able to explain it to other people as I'm learning. And at that point in time, so this was like 2013, there were a lot fewer blogs
Mm,
than there are now. There weren't really any people doing this on social media. None of the big websites like Forbes had launched into this space yet. I mean, TPG existed and NerdWallet existed. There were some
yeah.
bigger sites, but not to the same level as we are now. And so the landscape was entirely different. Um, and as I was blogging, there also weren't a ton of women in the space still. So
Hmm.
I slowly, not slowly, but like pretty quickly actually got picked up by a couple of smaller websites that were looking to have a little bit more diversity in their coverage. So Frugal Travel Guy was the first site that I
Hmm.
started writing for, and they were like, can you write 2 articles a week? We're going to pay you $75 an article, which wasn't a lot of money. But
Yeah.
at the time, I was like, heck yes, this is really cool. Like I was doing that for free, so I'll take $150 a week. Um, and as my name got out there, it picked up, it snowballed. And I
Yeah.
started writing for more and more sites. So I freelanced part-time to full-time from 2014 until 2019. And then in
Mm,
2019, I actually got recruited for the job at Forbes. They were looking to ramp up this new arm called Forbes Advisor. And
hmm.
I got an email from the hiring manager who was in charge of like kind of setting up the initial staff for this new thing. And I wasn't really looking for a full-time job because I loved freelancing, but you never say no to an email from an editor at Forbes.
Sure.
So I was like, okay, I'll just have a conversation and I'll convince them that I should freelance for them.
Right.
And then I'll have another client. But they were like, no, no, we need somebody full time. We need a full time editor to really build this. There might be freelance opportunities down the road, but that's not where we are right now. And I just kind of decided to give it a go. I did not imagine I would still be here 5 years later. I thought it would be a year or two and then I'd go back to freelancing. But during that time, we had a pandemic and travel was really slowed down. And I enjoyed, especially early on when we were in kind of more that scrappy startup phase, getting to learn a bunch of new skills and scale a content operation to a completely different level than I had been with
Mm.
my own blog and with some of these other sites that I wrote for. And so I'm still here now. I don't know how much longer I'll necessarily be at Forbes. I definitely am feeling like there are a lot of other things that I want to be able to do in my life. And work for another company takes up a lot of time every week. But at least for the time being, I'm sticking around.
Nice. That's a great arc to that journey. Heather, who is in our chat, always helps us pull up pertinent links as the guests are talking. She's pulled up some lovely 2014 article that says, "Hello, I'm Points Princess," which is
Yeah.
fantastic throwback to those that want to. You can click through and read a little bit about the start of that journey. You spoke about demographics, and Heather made a comment about this hobby has some particular demographics, and that's true of the Canadian realm as well. And I think I don't think your story is isolated for the US points sort of community. It just spans across the world. There were very few women. And those that were, and you're right, like I immediately started reading them because they brought such a different perspective to this entire points thing. And the first one I remember is Mommy Points, Summer started
Hmm.
writing on was already writing on boarding area when I joined them in 2014. So that to me was like, oh my God, this is a very different take on the same things I do as a heteronormative guy that has 10 less things to worry, well, 10 less things an hour to worry about. So to me, even as a guy, that I was a captive audience to that kind of sort of outtake to the points community, which is great. Have you seen that demographic change? You've been in the business for a while now. I see it
Yeah.
changing in the Canadian scape of things. Has that changed? Are there more individual voices or more women doing the same kind of things that you were 10 years ago? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I would say I think it's been shifting. I think there are more women involved in the space. I think there are more women who are like ultra involved and are speaking about the space. Like I can think of some women podcasters I know of, like Julia from GeoBreeze.
Yeah.
There are some people I follow on Instagram, and then just people I work with as well. Like Tony
Hmm.
Perkins is another editor at Forbes Advisor. I've known her since a Slack group years before we worked together professionally, but she's super knowledgeable in the space. And I think more women, in addition to more women are participating, I think more women are speaking up.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Heather is talking about a secret women's group in Canada, and that has existed for a while now, I think since 2017. Heather, I don't know if you'll be excited or bummed that I kind of was part of that initial conversation when that WhatsApp group was being created, just in on the back of a Points You conference that was in Calgary. So no, don't have any intentions of joining the group. I know a lot of the folks in there that do a good job of supporting each other in this points community. So yeah, it's I mean, different forums, different people are finding their niche, finding their audience, and sort of sticking around and supporting each other, which is fantastic. Just the way to go. I wanted to sort of also talk to you, sort of switch that a little bit and talk to you about when did you when did you realize that you had to make that switch from being sort of an engineer who then got recruited by Forbes Advisor to then becoming a full-time travel sort of nomad and doing this completely on your own? That because that it's one thing to leave a job and switch into something like a Forbes Advisor, which is very much within that points community industry or points industry rather, but quite something to completely change your lifestyle. So tell us a bit about that. Where did that cutoff happen? When did you realize that was this more out of opportunity or was it a slow burner, intentional change to your lifestyle?
Yeah, I changed my lifestyle actually pretty early on in this journey. So when
Mm,
I graduated and I was working that first engineering job and I was commuting an hour each way every day, it was really miserable. Like I cried on my way home from work on a regular basis. It was not fun. So I switched to a job in my hometown at the time where I was only commuting 15 minutes and I was working more reasonable, like 8 to 9 hour days. So that saved me so much time on a daily basis, but it was a 6 month contract. And at the time I was living in Michigan and I was dating somebody who lived in Baltimore. So my intention was that after I finished the 6 month contract, I was going to leave and move to Baltimore. So when my contract came up for renewal, there were actually two of us in the same job. I was like, don't even consider me. The other girl, she's staying here. I'm leaving anyway, so she can just have it. And I got ready to move to Baltimore and I flew to Baltimore and then I got dumped immediately. Like before I'd even moved, I'd gone there to scout my apartment. So I didn't really want to move to Baltimore anymore. My plan had been to enroll in an MBA program and I had applied, luckily, to one online MBA program through Indiana University. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll do that program because I'm already in. It's a really good school. It gives me some time to figure out what I'm doing. Like, I won't have a resume gap I have to explain away. And
mm,
the guy I had been dating and I already had flights booked to go to Thailand for that summer. So needless to say, we were not going to Thailand together, and I really wanted nothing to do with Thailand. So instead of going to Thailand for 10 days with him, I switched my trip and I went to Vietnam and Cambodia for about 6 weeks by myself. And after that trip, I was not really going back to an office. So I slowly chipped away at the MBA because I thought, it's a good thing to have in my back pocket. But it was
mhm.
shortly after that trip that I got the freelance writing gig for Frugal Travel Guy. So I was
Right.
making $150 a week, which isn't a lot of money, but it was enough to give me confidence that there could be more. And I
Hmm.
started doing award bookings for an award booking service called Award Magic, and it was
Yeah.
all commission based. So
Isn't that
like it wasn't a
Ari's?
lot of money. Yeah, it was
That's Ari,
Ari's.
right?
He
Yeah.
sold it last year or the year before.
I think year before,
Um,
2022, end of 22, he sold that to
yeah,
someone. I don't know who he sold
yeah,
it to, but I do remember because he
yeah.
also moved. Didn't he move completely to Israel
Yeah,
full
he
time?
did.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I started doing award bookings for him, and that was a little bit of money. And it was all, especially at the time I was 22. Like I didn't have a house, I didn't have kids, like I didn't have any expenses. I didn't even have to pay for health insurance because I was still on my parents' health insurance because in the US you can stay on your parents' health insurance until you're 26. So there was just so little risk. There was so little downside. I
Hmm.
was like, I'll just give myself some time to figure it out. And it snowballed. I got a few more clients over the course of that first year. And probably by the end of the second year, I was working solidly part-time doing freelance writing. And by the end of the fourth year, I would say that's when I felt like pretty sure that this could replace engineering as my career.
Hmm.
And by then I was almost done with the MBA, so I was like, I'll just finish that anyway. And it's been going well since then.
Cool. Yes, I think I'm reading that as life was happening, but you weren't giving up on your intentional lifestyle switch. So yeah,
Yep.
nothing happens just completely by chance. And I like the quote Heather has pulled up. They say life is what happens while you're busy making other plans. So
Yeah.
your trip to Baltimore, for all you know, was meant to happen, and that's that. It's a big turning point for the better, as they say, and for the better of this community who gets to learn so much more from your writing and from your advice that you put out on through Forbes Advisor. Oh, she quotes that on her Instagram, says Heather. So that's totally something that you had pulled up on your Instagram. You mentioned sort of trip to Thailand that didn't happen, but you did a side trip nonetheless. And it takes me back to sort of the last time I met you, or first time I met you in person, you and Kevin, both of you, was Bangkok just a couple of months ago. And since then, you've changed your location, and you're now in Argentina. So,
Hmm.
and because both of you are sort of full-time travelers, peel it back and tell us a little bit about how do you decide, like what are the variables that you think of before deciding, okay, now it's time to move, or after 2 months or whatever, how many ever weeks you do, you're like, this is going to be our next destination. And I know it's a very broad question, but if you could just talk to us about why Argentina, how did you decide Argentina, what some of the variables,
Hmm.
and then we'll switch it over. And I have so many questions about your lifestyle and tools and tips and tricks through credit cards and all of that. We'll switch gears and move straight into that. But I want to know how you pick your destination and what are the variables that sort of come into that discussion.
Yeah, sure. So I would say the base level how we pick our destinations is we want to go everywhere. So
Hmm.
Kevin and I are both trying to visit every country, and that's the conference we were at in Bangkok last year. Extraordinary Travel Festival is kind of for extreme travelers, either people who are trying to visit every country or have other kind of unusual but in an extreme way travel goals. Um, so, like last year, we spent a bunch of time in West Africa. I think over 6 months of last year, we were in West Africa. Super unusual travel destination, but we wanted to travel to some of those more challenging destinations. And Africa
Hmm.
has so many countries. 54 countries are in Africa, and both of us hadn't traveled that extensively within Africa. So that's how we chose that trip. We went to Bangkok for this conference. So sometimes we're traveling for conferences or because we want to be somewhere for a specific event or we want to meet up with friends. There's a conference that we've been going to the last 3 years and we'll be at again this summer in Bansko, Bulgaria, called Nomad Fest. And it's for digital nomads, but it's in this cool ski town that's pretty quiet in the summer, but still beautiful with fresh mountain air. And it's very affordable, which is nice to have those more affordable destinations mixed in. So we
Yeah.
usually try to have, like, we have a budget for the year. We try to balance the more expensive destinations with less expensive destinations so we're not completely blowing our budget. And then Argentina, we're here primarily because Kevin is trying to get residency in Paraguay
Right.
because they only tax income you make within the country. So if you're a resident, but your clients or your business or your employer is outside of Paraguay, you don't have to pay taxes on that money.
Hmm.
So it's
Yeah.
a pretty big tax haven. But since he was going to have to be there for that and go back at least once, we were like, well, let's spend some time in the region. We wanted to spend more time in Argentina, so we're here for this month. We'll be in Bariloche in the northern part of Patagonia for the month of April, and we're traveling a little bit in Brazil and Uruguay in between.
Neat. Because both of us have mentioned Kevin a couple of times, just bears, just for context, Kevin is now partner. Describe that partnership. I met both of you, and Kevin has, I mean, now you also have a great connect to Canada via Kevin and also apparently via Amex, as I learned through your
Yeah.
postings. We'll talk about that as well. But yeah, for context, people in this community obviously know Kevin. We are talking about Flight Trippers, co-founder of Flight Trippers, Kevin. Andrew was here with us, chatting with us a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, where did you guys meet? How did this happen? It's a beautiful love story that I got to hear a little bit about, and it bears
Yeah.
repeating for some of the listening audience.
Yeah, so we actually met at that Nomad Fest that I mentioned
Ah,
2 years ago, 3 years ago. I'm confused now. I think 3 years ago. Um, and 2.5 years ago. That's what it is.
has
We
Kevin
actually,
confirmed yet? I know he's sitting across from you. How many years is he saying?
he, how many years, Kevin? He's ignoring me.
Good. He's
He's
calculating.
busy with something on his computer.
Yeah, great
Um,
move, Kevin. Great move.
so yeah, we met there. We actually initially connected through Tinder, as one does these
Hmm.
days.
Yep.
Yeah, we would have met anyway though because there was a little Points and Miles meetup that we would have met at, and there was a little extreme travel meetup that we would have met at. But we hung out a few times and we enjoyed each other's company, but we didn't start like dating or traveling together full time then. We met again in October of that year, a few months later, at the first edition of the Extraordinary Travel Festival in
Armenia.
Armenia.
Mm.
Yeah. So at that conference, there was a little bit more drinking instead of coffee meetups. And so Kevin is a little bit on the shy side, and I am as well. So we needed just a little bit of that liquid courage to let each other know that we kind of liked each other. And then I'm a way in advance planner. Like I pretty much have most of the details of my travels planned like 3 months in advance. I have probably at least flights booked 3 to 9 months in advance, and then
Mm.
9 months to 12 months. I generally know at least what region I want to be in, or maybe what country I want to be in, but I don't have all of the details set. Kevin is not an advanced planner. He plans everything at the last minute. Like if it wasn't for me, he might not know what he's doing tomorrow. He before we travel together, he would book flights the day before all the time. It would be like, my visa's expiring, I have to leave, where am I going? But that worked out really well when we first met and started traveling together. Because after Armenia, I was like, well, I'm going to Bangkok for 2 weeks and then I'm going to Australia for 2 weeks. And well, I was supposed to go to Australia for 4 weeks and then go home. And he was like, I have no plans. And I was like, well, if you want, you can come hang out in Bangkok. And so he found a flight that worked well enough for his plans and the price and everything. So he came to Bangkok. And Bangkok was fun. So I was getting ready to leave to go to Australia. And I was like, well, if you want, you could probably come to Australia too. So he came to Australia. And then I actually did change my plans so that we could fly back to the States together because he was going to meet Andrew at something in Miami, I think. And
Hmm.
decided I would go surprise my parents for my birthday. Like I just knocked on their door and they thought I was calling them from Australia at that same time. So that was super fun. Um, and it was Kevin's first time flying like a proper business class. So we got to
Yeah.
do that together. So it was really fun
Nice.
and it worked out well that he didn't have any plans.
So where are you guys at in terms of planning? Are you still planning the trips together just super far in advance? Are you doing a little bit of both where it is the big chunks are planned super far in advance and the impromptu ones, Kevin is leading those and still booking stuff fairly last minute?
Mostly I just plan everything now. Kevin's
All
along for
right, so
the
he's
ride.
he's become a little
Yeah.
more hands off. That's awesome.
Yeah, he gets for our like birthday and Christmas gifts each year. We plan a trip for each other, which for me is just like what I do all the time for him anyway. But for like for his gift to me, he picks a 2 week chunk of time during the year and he plans everything for that. And it's a surprise until the last minute. So last year we went to the southeastern part of Turkey, which was super interesting. It was a re region he had traveled to before,
Adana?
but I hadn't. We were in Gaziantep and
Because
Mardin.
that's the side
Um,
that borders Syria and the
yeah,
other regions. Eh? Yeah, it's really
yeah.
beautiful. I've been to the towns just east of what's the beach down there? Bodrum,
I don't know.
east of
Oh
Bodrum.
yeah, okay,
Yeah,
east of Bodrum. Yeah, so we were more east from there.
further along. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And yeah, this year I know he's planning something for the end of August after we leave Bulgaria from that conference. But I don't know anything about what we're doing except for
Nice.
I'm pretty sure we're going to be in Europe somewhere.
That's nice. I'm also chuckling at Heather's comment about he's now become P2 because clearly you're
Yeah.
which is fantastic. Hey, look, let's switch gears and tell us a little bit about. So you gave us background in terms of how you decide the next destination. So let's piece out some of the accommodation pieces because I think in terms of financials, that would be one of your bigger expenses in any region. How do you leverage that through your credit cards and such? Tell us about how you even pick accommodations. Is it purely Airbnb, cheapest options, or is it combination of hotel certificates or long-term stays? Just take us through that whirlwind because a lot of the audience that's listening to you right now and even those that listen to you after my community particularly, we are very much the hotels folks. Like we'll use all of our
Mhm.
certificates, all of the points and stuff. But obviously for a nomad, that's slightly different. And I know
Mhm.
it's almost always a combination of the two and not just, oh, I don't do hotel points at all. So tell us a little bit about how you manage that bit, the financials, and how does it combine with your point strategy?
Yeah. The where we start is usually how long are we staying. So if the stay is longer than 10 days, let's say, almost guaranteed we're going to be in an Airbnb because we want to
Hmm.
have a kitchen and we want to have a little bit more space. It's usually also more cost effective, though definitely not true across the board. When we get into that, like, 3 day to 10 day range, I would say it depends a lot on the destination. Sometimes there's a really good hotel deal and then we'll stay at a hotel. Sometimes there's not, and then we'll stay at an Airbnb. We do pay a little bit of attention to hotel status. So I'm
Mhm.
Hyatt Globalist, so re-earning that Globalist status every year. Those 60 nights, it's
Yep.
it's a lot to work toward. So we will prioritize Hyatts where it makes sense, either based on the points cost or the cash cost. Um, Pretty much if we're somewhere less than 3 days, I would say we tend to stay in hotels. We do have a lot of certificates between us because I've been in this space for so long. I have a lot of US cards.
Mhm.
I don't know the exact count, honestly, off the top of my head, but the last time I counted, I think I had 52 different
Right.
accounts open.
Yep.
So it's a lot. And a
I'm
lot of
saying
those
yep
are
because I
hotel.
read that on your Insta somewhere.
Yeah. A lot of those are hotel cards. So I have a lot of hotel certificates. I got the Canadian Amex Bonvoy card
Yeah,
this
you're like a
past year.
salmon upstream. You did the
Yeah.
opposite of what most people want to do. We'll get
Yeah.
into that after we've spoken a little bit about hotels because I want to know about your experience doing the opposite.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay, so a
Yeah, and then Kevin
combination.
has certificates too. So if there's,
Hmm.
especially with those higher value certificates, if there's a really nice hotel in the area, we'll try to do that. Um, yeah, if the points prices are really good, like we're staying at the Hyatt Centric in Montevideo for a week in a
Hmm.
couple in like at the end of March. Um, because it's a category two, so it's a good price on points. And because I'm
Yep.
globalist, I have the suite night upgrade awards, so we get to stay in a suite for that whole week, which makes it a
Right.
really good deal. We're going to a city like 4 hours outside of Rio because there's a Hyatt that only costs like $75 a night there, and we're staying there for 10 nights because
Nice.
I need to figure out how to get these, like the rest of these 60 nights to requalify for status because I love
Hmm.
Hyatt Globalist status. Um, So definitely we wouldn't go there if it wasn't for the Hyatt, but it seems like a nice enough place to spend 10 days and get a little bit ahead on work before my parents are coming to meet us for a little bit of travel. And yeah, can't pass up those cheap Hyatt nights when I have the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, as a larger hotel chain, and the only one I think that has kept the award chart for good, I think it still is the most valuable in terms of on both ends, lower end Hyatt properties like the category two ones and twos that you mentioned, one, two, and three internationally outside of North America still are some really good properties on the
Mhm.
Hyatt portfolio, and of course, six and above still gives you the luxuries outside of North America. Again, that most other hotel chains don't give you that for that kind of points. Let me, so this is an annual discussion we have, right? So since you're a globalist and I've been globalist for a few years, I don't have the Hyatt card from the US, but tell us a little bit about how do you find through your travels and the perks that you're able to use, uh, the Hyatt business or Hyatt credit card versus, say, a Marriott Brilliant or the Hilton Aspire. Amongst these three, do you find one particularly giving you outsized value? Because the Hyatt card is not as flush with benefits, say, as a
Mhm.
Aspire or a Brilliant. So I wanted just your thoughts around these three cards because these are the three sort of chains that most of us points people try and run for. So
Yeah.
tell me a bit about that.
Well, I have all three cards.
Of course you do.
So,
Shocker.
I like that the Hilton Aspire card because it has the uncapped free night certificate. Like that's pretty
Hmm.
awesome that you can use it anywhere. And also getting complimentary diamond status, pretty epic. Like I think the value proposition is pretty solid
Yeah.
for people who stay in Hiltons at least a couple of times per year. I do kind of suck at using that certificate sometimes though, because I always want to maximize it because it's, you can use it anywhere, right? You want to use it at the best place. So this year I actually ended up redeeming it for my parents to stay at the Baker's Key Resort in Key Largo
Okay.
because it was going to expire and I was like, I have nowhere good to use it. So that was the best use. They just stayed there last week and they said it was really nice. So it's fun to treat other people with the stuff sometimes, even though like it's not really transferable, but they have the same last name and they know the drill about checking
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
or on a reservation under my name. The Bonvoy Brilliance, similarly, I love that it has the complimentary platinum status. It takes the pressure off of earning that because I
Yeah.
think I want platinum status because I
At
want
least for
that
the
food and
breakfast, if
beverage
nothing else.
benefit. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's nice to just not have to think about it. Some years I naturally stay enough with Marriott that I would qualify anyway, and I've even qualified for titanium status
Hmm.
in the past. But I love that I just don't have to think about it. Like it's great if it happens, but it doesn't have to happen. And that 85K cert is also pretty good. We've stayed some awesome places. Um, yeah, like that certificate is pretty solid and like
Yeah.
I usually redeem that one. Like there's
That
like
certificate hits on renewal only, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
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 And Kevin has that card now too, so I'm looking forward to having an extra one of those certificates to just get a little bit more value out of the stay.
For sure.
But the Hyatt card, I actually think is a good regular spending card up
Hmm.
to 15K in spend per year. Because once you hit that 15K in spend, you get an additional free night certificate. So you get two, the one that comes with the card plus the extra. It's only category 1 through 4, so not quite as valuable, but still
Yeah.
decent. And that 15K spend, you also get 6 nights toward elite status. So you get
Hmm.
5 for having the card plus the 6 for that spend. I think spending 15K on that card is a really good sweet spot. And
Yeah.
I use that one pretty regularly, especially earlier in the year. The other two I never spend on.
Have you finished exploring all their brands and getting the free nights out of that? No.
No, I mean I will at some point probably, but I
I
don't
think
really
I
try.
reached like a critical mass, and then after that, everything was like super resorty stuff, which I don't end up going to. So I think I got 2 or 3 nights out of them, but then I can't reach the five because the other brands are just so far-fetched. I'll have to like make an intentional effort to go somewhere
Yeah.
to be in those resorts. So I find, yeah, you sort of 3 nights, 15 brands is where I sort of got stuck with.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think I'm below that still because I end up staying at a lot more of the less expensive
right,
brands.
because you're also looking at longevity, right? So for me,
Yeah.
most of my travels tend to be 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, nothing beyond that. So yeah, yeah. Okay, so that's how I would have described it as well. That I find the Aspire card to be a little more valuable in terms of easy perks that you can use. Marriott Brilliant is the only one I have in my wallet, which exactly for that reason, it just takes the thinking game away. At least your platinum, I know my breakfast is sorted. Don't have to do any of these runs and whatnot. If I have to do a mattress run, then it'll just have to be for Hyatt and no others. Um,
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about, because you have so many of these cards, how do you not justify, how do you plan and rationalize a lot of these overlapping benefits between all of these cards, right? I'm just thinking all of the hotels, say the breakfast or the free night certificates are the easiest ones to use, but all the other benefits that are so overlapping, how do you decide which one to use, which one to make use of for that particular trip or leave it for later in the year? Because I mean, unlike you, for somebody like me that has 8 to 10 to 12 cards in a given year, I don't have as much overlapping stuff, but you must have a lot of
Mhm.
overlapping benefits. So how do you decide what's your primary, what's your secondary, and what you're using at a given instance?
I think it's mostly just based on whatever makes sense for the destination. So, like if we're looking at hotels, we're staying 3 or 4 nights, we want to stay in a hotel, and there's, like an IHG and it's $80 a night, and there's a Hilton and it's $100 a night, and it's an inexpensive country where I'm not going to spend
Mhm.
$20 on breakfast, then we might go for the IHG. So it's just kind of trying to think about total cost of a stay or an experience. Sometimes it's like we pay more sometimes for something we really want to do or to stay in a better part of town, or we just want to have a little bit more luxury. So it's not always the least expensive option, but we try to look at what that total cost will be. And then in terms of like completely overlapping benefits and justifying annual fees, I just try to not count benefits twice if they completely overlap. So like I have priority pass lounge access through, I
Oh
don't
my
know,
God, that
8 different
program.
cards.
Uh,
I don't count it on all of
let's
those
talk about
cards.
that because that lounge access stuff is getting out of hand with every credit card. And I'm just like, if everybody has a credit card and a lounge access, like forget overlapping benefits. It's just when you want to use it, you're standing in a lineup outside the lounge, just hoping to get in,
Yeah.
and all you wanted was a 3 hour peaceful
Yeah.
stay somewhere. Okay, yeah. So let's talk about that. So Priority Pass is a great example, or even all of the Nexus benefits, the
Yeah.
global entry, blah, blah, blah credits. Like, so you're just not worrying about those things. And
Yeah.
each card has a specific purpose in your mind, and it comes out
Yeah.
only when you need it. Otherwise, it's just sitting there.
Yeah. The with the lounge access, I do think lounge access is a lot better abroad compared to in the US and Canada. There are more lounges, the crowding issues aren't anywhere near as significant in my experience. Maybe in
In
Europe,
India and
but
China, the
it is
worst.
bad.
It
Okay.
is so bad. It is so bad, I
So
can't
not
even tell.
across the board
Because
then.
I guess just the combination of population and a very strong, still growing middle class that has access to
Fair.
disposable income is now just that credit card market is blowing up in both of these countries. And some of the points people and what they're able to leverage in those two countries are just completely different level playing field. So I find
Yeah.
lounges haven't kept up in those two countries, particularly with the number of credit card signups they're seeing. Like what we
Yeah.
are now starting to see with Amex Centurion, for example, has been the case in those countries for the last 10 years for pretty much
Hmm.
every regular lounge is oversubscribed.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Versus like we flew through Sao Paulo on our way here from Montreal this year, and we went
Mhm.
to the Centurion Lounge there, and it was not crowded. Like it
Yeah.
was it was super solid, good food, not crowded, a really really nice experience. And
May
so
have
then
something to
that's
do with their Amex card is like $1,500 or something like that
yeah,
in annual fees.
that's also fair. Yeah. And yeah, that's all like the Amex cards, there are certain cases where the benefits don't quite overlap. So of course the Amex Platinum does give priority pass lounge access, but it also offers a little bit more. And in the States,
Hmm.
the Sapphire Reserve, we get access to the
Hmm.
Sapphire lounges, the Venture X, you get access to the Capital One lounges. So I do, in cases like that, there is additional value I get out of having that additional card. So I'll consider that piece of it, but not Priority Pass
For
across
sure.
all the cards.
Yeah, between Priority Pass and Dragon Pass and all of those, it's just becoming a bit of a gimmick now on most cards that are able to offer that. What do you think is the future of lounge access? Because obviously we are seeing a bit of a head-to-head competition between airline lounges and all of these private other consortium lounges that are coming through, credit card lounges like you spoke about Chase and the City. And to be, I mean, some of those Chase lounges look so good, but they are
Hmm.
very specific to certain city hubs as well, right? So what do you
Yeah.
think is the future? How does one frequent flyer rationalize that kind of access to an airline lounge versus somebody that's just kind of doing it as a lifestyle like you are versus somebody like me that's only going maybe 4 or 5 times in a year and is wanting a certain type of access. Where do you see this entire thing going between the airlines, private lounges, credit card lounges, and only limited space in every airport, right?
Hmm. I do think we'll continue to see expansion of the credit card lounges.
Hmm.
Um, but I think in terms of how different people utilize these, it just depends so much on somebody's travel profile. Like somebody who's always flying out of the same airport, it makes sense to look at what's available at that airport, or maybe they're always flying between the same two airports, like your typical kind of business traveler. Um, Looking at what is actually available in those places and narrowing in on how do you get access to the best option is,
Hmm.
I think, the best strategy versus somebody like me or somebody who doesn't always travel to the same places, but even doesn't travel full time, just takes a couple of trips a year, but always to different places. It makes more sense, I think, to cast a wider net because then you're much more likely to
Yeah.
be able to get in somewhere. And I think even when the lounges are relatively crowded or the food isn't very good or maybe there's no free wine or beer or there's no showers, it still often beats being in the terminal.
Sure.
So I
Yeah.
try to think about it from that perspective, like even if I have to wait in line to get in or I have to register ahead of time and wait till I'm called, it's still usually, not always, but usually better than waiting for the flight in the terminal.
Yeah. Yes, I'm just being trepid because yes, I've had times where I've gone to a United Lounge and walked out because every seat is taken. People are just standing all over the place, and you're like, if you have to stand, just go out to the terminal. Why are you in
Yeah.
here?
Yeah,
So I'm a
not
little split
always.
on that. And to Heather's comment, I think she's making a decent point in terms of saying it's going to create more tiers of lounge quality and access. And I think that's already happening. Even airlines almost have two-tier lounges as well, right? Like lounge that everybody can use, including credit card and this, that, and the other. And then there are some
Hmm.
quote unquote flagship lounges that only business
That's
class
true.
travelers, international travelers are able to use. So we are already seeing that kind of segmentation by airlines. And I wonder if that's the way airlines are going to go and all the others kind of become like private operators based on credit card, based on membership programs and such.
Hmm.
Like in Canada, Air Canada signature lounges. Air Canada has even ventured into cafe style lounge, which is just for that typical traveler who wants to get in, grab a couple of things, is not going to be sitting there for hours. It's going to, he or they are going to be sitting there for maybe 30 minutes, an hour, and then off to their next flight. So they're trying out these different things. So I think, yeah, valid point, Heather, in terms of that tier system almost coming through.
Hmm.
Um, how do you have a particular hot take on all of these? Since we were talking priority and such, priority security clearance like Nexus or Global Entry and things like that. Do you prefer one or the other? I've never used Clear myself. Sometimes the Clear lines seem like the best way to go, but consistently, my view is if you're going during peak business hours, I find, at least in Canada, there's always a lineup for airline priority, like people that
Hmm.
have elite status or are flying business or first class. That line seems to be the fastest because there's enough people who are flying economy and have Nexus or otherwise,
Hmm.
but are not flying business or first class. Like, what's your take? Because I often just look at the smallest line and go through. And then
Yeah.
also rationalizing all of these overlapping credits and what do you do with those on your credit cards?
Yeah. So I've had global entry for a really long time. I earlier on in my travel days, I wasn't like leaving the US once for the year and being gone for 11 months like I am now. I was like going and coming back and going and coming back. So I actually think from that perspective, I used to get a lot more value out of global entry than I do now. And similarly, I was flying a lot more in the US. So I got more benefit out of TSA PreCheck than I do now. Now I
Hmm.
have like, maybe two or three domestic segments per year, and I enter the US once, maybe twice per year. That said, I still think it's worth it because it's essentially free. And I actually just switched to Nexus. So my renewal came due like actually a long time ago, like 2 years ago. It took so long for
I
me to get
know.
the conditional approval. I think it took 19 months
Yeah, I think
for me
mine
to
was
get the
about the same, an
conditional
hour and a half,
approval.
sorry, a year and a half
Yeah.
before I saw the conditional approval come through on mine, which came through very
Yeah.
recently, August or September
Oh
2024.
yeah, similar timing for me. So I went to do my interview when I was back for the holidays this year. So now I think since I'm we go to visit Kevin's family and we go to visit my family, and sometimes we'll be driving across the border and sometimes we'll be flying. Having Nexus, it's definitely still worth it. I think I'll get enough time savings out of it over the course of 5 years to easily justify the time it took to get the interview. Um, and yeah,
Yeah,
it's only $50. So even
for
without the
sure.
credit, like it doesn't really matter. But I think I have, I don't know, 20 Nexus and TSA pre-check credits. So I do like my parents and I do my
I
sister
was
and
just gonna say,
I
then you
try to
start
give it
convincing people
away.
around you just
Yeah.
because you have credits. You're like, hey, just use it and charge
Yeah.
it to my card and be done with it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a little bit of extra value. Like it's a little good deed.
Oh yeah, I
But
mean, as a deed, it's great, but as a product, I think over time it'll suffer anyways because just again,
yeah, that's
idea
true.
that too many people are going to have it because when you're just doling out these credits on every card. There are a couple of comments that I thought were good ones. I wanted to give a shout out to. Steve mentioned Plaza Premium recently opened the first lounge in YVR, Vancouver, around 50% upcharge. What's your take on this upcharge business? Do you think that's a model that sticks for lounges or particularly for passengers or customers? Will they ever be okay with paying 50% upcharge at a nicer location?
Yeah, I would think that there will be people who are willing to, and depending on what the upcharge is and what
Hmm.
you get for that upcharge, I could see it working. And I'm sure if like Plaza Premium launched this lounge with an upcharge, I'm sure they think it's going to work. Like they've probably
100%.
done some surveys of potential members or existing members, and they think it's a good idea. So time will tell, I guess, if they keep
Hmm.
it. But I could see it working for sure.
Yeah. And the other piece that I think Alex, who mentioned that, Alex mentions, hence why the time limit on entering a lounge, unless you're connecting, wish there was more ways to virtual queue before arriving at the airport. And I think that is it Delta? Somebody has done that through their app where you could virtual queue yourself to a lounge. I forget which airline, but there are services out there already where you can join virtual queue. I just do not recall who it is. But yeah, th those things will really help. Like if you could virtually queue in, and yeah, $50 upcharge depending on what it is. Like if the difference was having showers and a couple of drinks included, I think I would do it. If I was on my big international trips and whatnot, $50 doesn't seem like a whole lot for sure. Greg says
Hmm.
with Nexus, someone told me that interview calendars open up first Monday of the month. Can someone confirm I can't get an interview for my daughter? I can't confirm when it opens up, Greg, but Caroline, feel free to jump in. But what they've done really well is you do your first interview wherever you are in the US or Canada, whichever is your home country. Then the second step, that second interview, now you don't have to do it immediately. You can do it whenever you travel and you get up to 3 years to do it. So, for example, if you did your Canadian side of interview and then you wanted the US side, you can do that interview bit the next time you travel to the US. So they have segmented that into a two-step process, which is a lot easier than having that sort of constantly trying to book two interviews or doing it one after the other. But I don't know when the interviews open, to be honest. And people will book at various airports depending on where their travels take them. Have you heard about anything in terms of when interview schedules open?
I don't know when exactly the schedule
Mm,
opens, but I know that there are usually a lot of cancellations day of and day before. So when
mm,
I booked mine, I booked for a date that I knew would work, but then as it got closer, I was like, oh, actually, it would have been better if I'd booked this. And so I just started watching for cancellations like in the week leading up to when I wanted the interview to be, and I was able to change my time to a better time. I did mine at the Detroit Windsor Enrollment Center. So I
yeah,
guess both interviews happened at the same time. I wasn't
yeah.
aware of the segmented interview. I didn't even know that was an option. And maybe because I'm American,
I
maybe
think
it's a
that's what,
different
yeah.
policy.
It,
So,
yeah, there's this entire thing between if you're doing your things in the US enrollment centers have both access to both of those officers. So you're able to do it both. For folks doing it in Canada, we don't have immediate access to US officers, I mean, there's no one enrollment office at airports where both officers are. Um,
mhm.
CBP and TSA, I guess, or whoever the other body is. So we had to do two of these things, but now they've segmented it so that Canadians are not constantly feeling the pressure of booking two separate interviews and whatnot. So you could do your Canadian one. In my case, I'll tell you what happened. I did my Canadian one, and then they told me, oh, whenever they explained this two-step thing to me, which also came through in an email. But then I didn't have to. My conditional approval went to fully approved even without doing the US one.
Oh, nice. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So I guess for renewals based on your background and history, some of them they're like, yeah, whatever, you're good to go. But if it's your first time, then yes, you still have to do that second one with the US one whenever you're getting into the US, or you can book both of those depending on. Uh, Steve says for Nexus appointments, there are Twitter bots which notify with the appointment openings. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think I was able to book mine here in the Ottawa airport, which isn't the busiest of airports to begin with, but I was able to get something within the month. So it wasn't crazy, but I did see that a lot of the prime time was taken fairly quickly as soon as I saw my conditional stuff come up. And yeah, speedynexus.com has gotten a plug here. Pre-booking available for some priority pass locations, Heather. Okay, perfect. What were we talking about? Yeah, lounges and overlapping. Speaking of overlapping benefits and stuff, in your portfolio or in your experience, are there some underutilized perks or benefits on premium cards that people don't really realize but should be using it and has really unlocked value for you?
Yeah, on some of the premium travel cards in the US, specifically the Chase Sapphire
Mhm.
I can't, I'm combining the
Chase
card
Sapphire
names,
Preferred, yes.
Preferred and
CSP,
Reserve.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, CSR, CSP
CSR.
also, but the travel insurance benefits that are included.
Mm,
I always book my travel with my Sapphire Reserve because it has the best travel insurance benefits across the board, in at least compared to other US cards. So you get trip delay insurance if if your flight is delayed by 6 hours or more or overnight. You get baggage delay insurance,
mm,
and especially with how much I travel, I would say at least once or twice a year I'm making use of those benefits. And I give up extra points to do that. Like if I
hmm
booked the flights with my Amex Platinum, I would earn 2 extra points per dollar, but I would much rather
I was
have
going to
the
ask, how does it
insurance.
compare to the Amex Platinum benefits?
So Amex Platinum requires that you book round trip travel for the US card to get the travel
Wait, back up, back
insurance.
up. It has to be a round trip travel? Cannot be
It
one way?
So it might, I've not tested it, but and it might work if you book two one ways, but you can
Right,
show that it's a round trip. But
correct.
that's not how we travel. We're,
Mm,
one way, one
mm.
way, one way, one way.
Yeah, yeah.
If I submitted a whole year's worth of travel that showed eventually we came back to where we started, would Amex cover it? I don't know, but it's not worth the risk and the extra hassle to me. Like it's already sometimes a bit of a pain to get the claims approved because you always have to get that statement from the airline about how long the delay
hmm
was and why was it delayed. And then if they don't say one thing exactly right, then the benefits provider will be like, oh no, we need it to say this. And so sometimes there's already a little too much back and forth. So I don't need to
hmm
make that more complicated than necessary. In the US, some of the premium Amex cards have a benefit called return protection,
Okay.
where if you buy something and then you
Oh
end
yeah.
up not liking it, but it's past the return window
Yeah.
that merchant allows, you can file a return protection claim, and then Amex will reimburse you the price of that item up to certain limits and terms and conditions, etc. But if I feel kind of on the fence about buying something, I'll usually stick it on an Amex card that has that benefit because then if I decide that I don't like it, no big deal. I can get
Yeah.
that money refunded. And then some of our cards also have cell phone insurance.
Hmm.
So especially traveling, I mean, anytime in life, I guess you never know when you're going to drop your phone. Or I had a phone stolen once. So it's really nice to not have to pay anything extra to still have the cell phone insurance.
Yeah, yeah. I think both of those are now available across most premium cards in Canada as well. The uh, the other one is called purchase protection or something like that, and then of course the cell phone one is the cell phone,
Yeah.
whatever terminology they use, exactly the same. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so
Um,
there's actually there's purchase protection and there's return protection. So
okay.
the
So
purchase
I haven't seen the
protection,
return protection.
I don't think you have it on Canadian
Hmm.
cards. The
Okay.
purchase protection is like if an item gets damaged or stolen or something within a certain number
Right.
of days after purchase. So yeah, if you
Correct.
like
You're
yeah
right.
bought a whatever camera and you spilled water on it and then the
Hmm.
camera can't be repaired, you could use your purchase protection to get reimbursed for that. But the
Correct.
return protection is just like I don't like this thing. I don't want this thing. It doesn't fit. Like whatever it happens to be, I don't want it anymore and
How
it's past the
long?
return window.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask, what is that return window that the
So
insurance is
it
willing to cover?
so it has to be past the return window that the merchant will accept. So like let's use Amazon as an
Yeah.
example. Amazon's return window is typically 30 days. So
Right.
if it's after 30 days, but then prior to 90 days, that's how
Okay.
long the Amex benefit exists. And there are lots of exclusions and it's maximum $300 per item and $1,000 per year. So it's not like
Hmm.
an unlimited
Yeah, but it's
thing.
still
Um,
significant. That's pretty
it still
solid.
is great for if
Yeah.
you're not sure or yeah, you're ordering, especially for clothes, like you don't know what size it's going to be. You don't know if it's going to fit properly, and some websites are just have no return policy. Like once you get it, it's yours. And that's
Hmm.
really annoying for certain types of products. So I love the premium Amex cards for that reason.
Iyad is bringing up a question that is like a perennial evergreen question in the world of booking award flights and things like that. And back to your insurance question, isn't that for cash bookings only? Like we were talking about the CSR card or the Amex premium cards, the platinum cards, for example. What's your experience around booking flights on points and which cards, in your experience, US or Canada or otherwise, provide the best coverage for reward bookings?
So the Chase Sapphire Reserve and Chase Sapphire Preferred, you only have to pay a portion of the flight with the
Hmm.
card to get the benefit. So if I pay the taxes and fees with the card, I'm good. And
Right.
that's another reason why I really like that card, that family of cards for the travel insurance benefits. There are times where, like if I'm using, like United has their travel bank. So I
Hmm.
have some money in my United travel bank. When I'm booking a United flight and I want to use my travel bank, I'll put everything but like 10 cents on my travel bank and I'll put the 10 cents on my CSR and I still get the insurance.
Crap, I just
So
remembered I used the travel bank and I just randomly put that on my Aeroplan card and I have no clue if it covers. Oh,
yeah.
crap. Okay,
But
sorry.
I know the insurance is a lot more difficult with the Canadian cards because
Yeah,
Kevin's
yeah.
always telling me like, no, I have to pay the full amount with that card, and all of your cards have foreign transaction fees, basically. What's up with that?
I know that it's basic. I'll tell you what's up. It's such a big bottom line for these banks. I mean, as a percentage of population, Canadians travel a lot more than any other percentage of population. I mean, it's easy to see, right? As soon as it gets cold, there's an entire chunk of population that goes down to Florida or other sun destinations for the entire winter, especially those that are retired and have access to disposable income. Because so many people, anyways, travel overseas, there is no reason for these banks to waive those fees for you because it builds such a large chunk of their ancillary revenue. They're unwilling to. I guess in the US, at least how it started off is less percentage of your population travels outside or even holds a passport to begin with. So it's an encouragement to be able to use those cards internationally and still not have to. So I think that's where it started off from. But now, just as competition brews up cross border between Canada and US banks, that is, we are seeing some cards come through with no foreign exchange sort of built into the card, but nowhere close
Hmm.
to, I mean, the US, where almost every other
Yeah.
card is. I was going to ask you something and it'll come back to me. Uh, Couple of comments here that the majority, Steve says, majority of premium co-branded cards will have travel insurance on their reward bookings. Oh yeah, I was going to say, in Canada, there are very specific cards that do allow partial booking to be covered as well. Not the big common ones. I know BMO or Bank of Montreal used to have cards or still has cards that will cover partial bookings as well. But from what I understand and know, the big ones like Amex and those do not cover partial bookings. But Steve is giving us a data point, says, I've used my Amex Aeroplan Reserve insurance successfully just by doing partial bookings. Yeah, and Iyad is saying, pointing out correctly, it's only for their program. So if you're using an Aeroplan premium card to book Aeroplan reward tickets, it's covered, but not if you were booking kind of like what I did with my United Travel Bank. Hey, speaking of, thanks to Amex offers, since we are talking so much, talking about benefits and such, just underutilized benefit I feel is Amex offers as well. Not everybody uses everything, but if you're keyed
Hmm.
into that, it gives great value. For example, United gave out a whole bunch of credits last year, and I kept them in my United Travel Bank and kept sort of moving that date up, which now they have closed the loop. I don't know if you knew this. You can't move your earlier. You would, you know, how you got your travel bank and it gives you a full year to be able to use it. You could easily extend the date on it just by changing your booking or upping your booking and paying a little bit more. So, say for example, if I
Hmm.
booked Ottawa to Chicago and that was the travel bank book locked in there, I would make that Ottawa to, I don't know, Vegas, and then pay that additional 30, $40, and then boom, it went
Hmm.
one more year from that date. So they've closed that loop. But more recently, what it did allow me to do, although the date is locked in, you could still use your United Travel credits by changing the destination and paying any difference. So you could still
Hmm.
change your destination within that, but not your dates anymore. So kind of
Interesting.
still little wiggle room available in there. Are there other programs that do as well as United Travel Bank? I don't think other airlines in the US have something as robust as a United Travel Bank, right?
JetBlue has something, but I'm not
Okay.
super familiar with it. I don't fly JetBlue often. I just know my sister has some JetBlue credit that's expiring like tomorrow, and she doesn't have a use for it. So if anyone here needs to book a JetBlue flight, reach out to me, and I'll see if I can get my sister to coordinate making the booking for you.
Perfect. Likewise, I have Virgin Atlantic credit sitting as an Amex offer, and I was hoping they have a wallet or something where I could just bank in and use it later, but they don't have anything. United still has the most robust sort of wallet travel credit program,
Hmm.
which is fantastic. Um, you spoke about a little bit about insurance, and we were talking about credit card insurance. What did you? Oh, yeah, you mentioned that in the US, you could be under your parents' health insurance for up until you were 26. Tell us a little bit about how health insurance and all of that plays into your travel lifestyle. How are you going through private companies to get yourself health insurance now, or are you still able to do a combination of credit card health insurance versus the others? Like, tell us a little bit about that.
So through my full-time job with Forbes, I have health insurance and the cost is pretty minimal.
Mhm.
So it makes sense for me to have that. It only covers me while I'm in the US though, which is not very convenient. But if anything really bad ever happened and I had to get back to the US to have treatment, I would be covered there. I do also have just travel insurance through Safety Wing.
Mm,
which they're like I just find their policy has pretty decent coverage. I've had to make claims. It's been a pretty easy process overall. And it's very nomad friendly, like it was created for digital nomads, though
mm,
anyone can use it. I've gotten my parents' safety wing policies before when they've traveled, so anyone, it's open to anybody. But yeah, that's like just travel insurance, so it just covers, any emergency thing that I have to do while I'm traveling. But healthcare costs are so much lower everywhere else in the world, basically, than the United States. So sometimes it's not even worth it to bother with submitting the claim. Like I just go to the doctor and it's like $10. Or one of my friends a couple years ago when we were in Bulgaria, he slipped getting out of the pool at the Hyatt Regency that's in Sofia and
mm.
cracked his head. Like he didn't like crack his
Oof.
skull, but just
Yeah,
like
yeah.
he needed
Open it up.
stitches.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he went to the hospital and they were like, it's free, just go. Like it wasn't worth it for them to even do the paperwork. So I think it works out well since I'm employed. Like I'm covered when I go back to the US, and I'm covered in the US if anything like really bad
Hmm.
happens where I need like long-term treatment or massive surgery or whatever. If I ever freelance again, I would look into getting a more comprehensive medical insurance, but geared toward expats. Kevin just got a policy through Cigna Global,
Okay.
and it doesn't include US insurance. So when he's back in the US, he'll have to get travel insurance for the US, but it covers like emergency and preventative, like comprehensive travel insurance in almost every country in the world.
Mm.
And
If
it's
For
super affordable.
for your kind of travel lifestyle, do any of the travel medical benefits from credit cards even stick? Because they typically have like a 15-day, 20-day, 30-day policy, right? So because past that, it won't cover you.
Yeah, I've never really looked into the details
Mm.
too much.
Okay, fair
Yeah,
enough.
it wouldn't be, I wouldn't feel comfortable having just that if I
Oh
ever
yeah.
thought that it would be beneficial. Like I know that the Chase Sapphire Reserve, I think, has some sort of dental coverage.
Mm.
So if I ever needed to get dental work done abroad, other than just regular cleaning, I would think about trying to use that, but I've never tried, and I'm not super well versed on any of the nitty-gritty of those benefits.
Yeah, I'm spoiled in the sense that because I grew up in India, our family doctor is in India. I moved to Canada as an international student. I've sort of been here for 20 odd years, but uh, just don't have to sort of lean on the medical system here because of the wait times are a bit much. So every time I'm back home seeing my parents, I do make it a point to sort of get any of my stuff done if I had to, if it had to be done. And India, much like that part of the world, medical services are pretty solid if you go to the private clinics and not as expensive. So lucky that
Hmm.
way. But for folks that, if you are looking at travel insurance or any other kind of insurance, To is also a great platform to book your travel insurance, TUGO. And that's the one I learned through Avery, a common friend of ours, way back when. And apparently their payouts and the ease of dealing. And I think that's what it really comes down to. And you mentioned it, right? It's just how much back and forth can you have for something that can be either small or big or whatever. And apparently, To was built for a lot of these people that were on the go kind of thing outside of Canada, and they've been doing pretty well in terms of customer service rep and all of that. Um, I am cognizant of time, Caroline. Please stop me if you think that this we are going over, but I have so many more things to ask you. Are
I'm
you good?
good.
Are you good on time?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
good.
Perfect. In sort of because we were talking about credit cards and benefits and this, that, and the other. In my world, in this community of points, miles, and bling, we often the noise around premium cabin redemptions and this, that, and the other drown out simple things like cashback cards. Are you a big user of cashback cards or even flexible redemptions in terms of because oftentimes when we are advising families and them who don't travel as much, the obvious next answer is why don't you just put everything on a nice cashback card and get
Hmm.
enough money that will support you for those 2 trips in a year that you need to take? What's your what's your advice around people that don't or that can't necessarily leverage all of these travel perks through travel credit cards? Where else
Hmm.
should they look for in that big portfolio of credit cards in the US?
My My recommendation for most people would be to stick with a flexible rewards card. I
Hmm.
would generally recommend either the Chase Sapphire Preferred or Reserve or the Capital One Venture X, depending on what benefits people care about, because they all three of those cards earn solidly. They have different levels of benefits, like mid-tier to more premium benefits, like depending on which option you choose. And when it comes time to redeem the points, you have the option to transfer to various partners and potentially get more value, but you can redeem through the portal and get solid value. So for somebody who likes to travel, I would generally recommend one of those three cards. For somebody who likes to travel maybe a little bit less, I would say maybe get a cash back card. But for myself personally, I don't really do cash back. I have some cash back cards, but it's pretty rare that I
Hmm.
use them. I don't really redeem my points through the portals. I'm not going to say I never have, but I can't think of a time I have off the top of my head because I'm usually trying to get more than ideally 2 cents per point for
Yeah.
my 2 US cents per point, that is,
Hmm.
for my redemptions. Because with how much Kevin and I travel, if we lower that bar too much, we'll just blow through our points. I mean, like we have a
Right.
good number of points, but paying for two people to travel full time, and we're not even crazy with how many long hauls we take per year. It's usually like 3 to 4 maximum long haul
Hmm.
flights per year, but we would still not be able to earn points as fast as we redeem points if we lowered that threshold too much.
For sure, because you're also not in a country. I mean, oftentimes you're in countries that are slightly, I mean, the cost of living is cheaper, or
Yeah.
so you're not even building up the points
Or
balance
they
as
don't
much
take
as
credit card
exactly.
very many
Yeah.
places. Yeah.
Oh, great segue. Speaking of not taking credit cards very many places, tell us a little bit about how do you manage this entire cashless sort of lifestyle, being in countries that are still a little more cash dependent. What's your ATM strategy, withdrawing money, changing
Mhm.
conversion? Like what other tools and services that you're using to supplement that side of things?
Our primary use is ATM cards that reimburse ATM fees.
Hmm.
There are currently that I can think of two off the top of my head available in the US. One is the Charles Schwab card. You have to have their high yield investor
Hmm.
checking account, and the other is through Fidelity. I also have a ATM card through SoFi that used it. I'm grandfathered into getting the ATM fee
Okay.
reimbursements. So that's one's actually my favorite because it reimburses the ATM fees right away rather than having to wait until the end of the month, which Charles Schwab, it all comes at once at the end of the month. Fidelity, I actually don't know. I never really used that card. But yeah, I mean, that's such a great benefit. Here in Argentina, it's actually wild. You can get maximum so far that I've discovered out of any ATM 35,000 Argentine pesos, which is about 35 US dollars
Right. And
maximum
isn't there
in
a
one
big difference in black
transaction.
market and ATM withdrawals?
Not as much as there used to be. It's about
Okay.
10% now. It used to
Oh,
be
that's not
closer to
bad.
50%. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I
But
remember it as.
the ATMs here charge 10,000 to 12,000 pesos per withdrawal. So you're paying $10 to get out 35,000, $35. I was going to get a pedicure last weekend and they had a big discount if you paid in cash. So it's like I
Hmm.
need to pay in cash. I had to do I wanted to have a little bit of extra money beyond that too, but I did 5 ATM withdrawals like back to back to back. I was like, thank you, SoFi, for paying that $50 in ATM fees. Completely absurd. But
Well,
yeah,
if
it's
you're
great to
grandfathered
have
in, may as
that.
well just keep using it and
Yeah.
leverage what you have for sure.
Yeah. And it's nice a lot of countries not having to get out more than we think, we'll need kind of in the immediate future.
Hmm.
Before I had these cards, I would get out, two or three or $400 at a time, and then you're carrying around all that cash.
Yeah.
Now it's pretty rare that I'll get out more than 100 in one go because why,
Hmm.
like there's no need to. But we also usually travel with some euros and some USD because some countries it's you get a better rate if you
Yeah.
exchange or like we were in Nigeria
I was
last
going to say
year
West
when,
Africa, if you have US dollars,
yeah,
goes the furthest for sure.
yeah, and
And
like
smaller
the
denominations.
ATMs. Yeah, yeah, because sometimes ATMs have no money, or there aren't ATMs, or you get a better rate, or what have you.
I remember in Nigeria once I was rejected because apparently my $10 bills were older than a particular
Mm.
year,
Hmm.
2008 or 2009 or something like
Yeah,
that.
or like the corners bent just a little bit, they
Yeah,
won't
yeah,
let it
yeah.
either.
It was an entire
Hmm.
year thing, and they sifted through my entire, not pile, but whatever I gave them, and I think good $200 of my $10 bills. They were like, "These are too old." And I'm like, "What do you mean old?
Yeah,
They're still USDs," and they're like, "Nope, can't take it."
yeah.
Even the black
Hmm.
market people weren't taking it, so I was like, "Okay, I guess I'm stuck with that." But just came back into the country and used it somewhere else, and it was fine.
Hmm.
Cool. I did have a question around this. Exchange and what? Oh, yeah. Uh, Quickly tell us about between now that you have a Canadian card, how are you planning to? So tell us about this. I mean, why? Why did you venture into Amex Canada? What made you, other than just pure love for Canada?
Yeah, that of course. And kind of just trying to see if it's possible. I think
Okay.
that's a big thing in this hobby is just like, what works? Like,
Hmm.
how does it work? Can I figure it out? Can I make the situation better for myself? And,
Yeah.
like, can I earn more points? With the Marriott Bonvoy card specifically, having that extra free night cert, like,
Yeah.
sometimes we are not good at using them just because we're trying to always maximize them.
Maximize.
We're
Yeah.
trying to get better at that, like not leaving it till the last minute. But because of how we travel, how much we travel, there's always going to be a case where I can use that certificate at a hotel that costs more than like $90.
For
So
sure.
like we're going to have to stay at an airport hotel sometime during the year and it's like it's $120. Like I there's going to be a way to come out ahead. Um so that was the reason why I picked that card for the first card and I the next one I have my eye on is the RBC card,
Hmm.
which Kevin,
Has.
yeah, I'm like waiting for their link to get approved so I can apply because they have an increased sign up bonus right now. And those miles transfer to American Airlines.
Yeah.
So that's pretty compelling.
Yeah. You
But I
could.
probably won't go too crazy with the US card, with the Canadian cards, but I'll at least, get a
No,
couple,
there's.
or if the bonuses are high enough and it makes
Yeah.
sense, like it helps to have more options.
Oh, for sure. I mean, unlike way back when, I think some of the acquisition offers right now in Canada are very, very strong. They may not be huge acquisition offers. They're not like 150,000 Amex points or 200,000 Amex points, but even say a 55,000 RBC points is very strong for what that card's
Hmm.
annual fee is and what it kind of yields in terms of a transfer thing, either to American or to Avios directly, which gives you that 30% bonus a couple of times a year as well. So no, for sure. Um, how do you plan to pay? I mean, is paying Canadian cards using your US bank accounts just as difficult as the other way around, or is it much easier for you to pay your Canadian bank balances?
I've been doing it through Wise. So I convert
Yeah,
USD to Canadian dollars direct, like exactly how much I need in Canadian, and then I send that to Amex Canada. But yeah, as you know, this card is not a good daily spending card. So once I hit the sign up bonus, I'm
yeah,
not going to have to pay that card again until the annual fee comes due. So it's kind of a sock drawer card at this
yeah.
point, and I'll just have to think about that once per year.
And your comment is something that people should think about is people often sort of do too many jumping of hoops and things whatnot for like one or two payments in a year. If it's one or two payments in a year, you could just simply do it through a simple service like a Wise. Yes, you'll lose out a little bit on that conversion, but whatever, at least you're paying off that card. And then it's if it's going to be a soft drawer card, then you may as well just do it the simple way. Then there's a whole other sort of ways of doing things will just save you a little bit of money here, a little bit of money there. But that kind of hoop jumping is okay if that's your everyday card. That's what you're putting money on and basically paying every month for it, right? So it bears repeating that if that's a card that you've gotten cross country, like you're from Canada and a US card or other way around, if it's just one payment or two payments in a year, it's well worth your time just doing the simplest way possible, sometimes even a
Hmm.
direct bank transfer and quote unquote losing a little bit of money in there because that little bit of money is
Yeah.
worth way more than going through the hassles of jumping two, three
Yeah.
institutions and timeline and all of that, which a lot of people in Canada do for very little gains. And it's
Yeah.
just, again, comes down to the time you want to spend.
That's
Uh,
something I've thought about so much lately because in this hobby, there's so much mental overhead. And
exactly.
I do this for my full-time job and I've been doing this for a really long time. And I still feel like sometimes I get overwhelmed with like, did I use all of those benefits or, like, did it actually trigger? And that mental overhead is very taxing. So when possible, when you can make something simpler, I think it's so much better.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm not saying this for you, I'm saying it for myself. As I'm getting older, it sort of is becoming more of that. I'm like, can I just throw a
Yeah.
little bit of money at it and just be done with it, as
Yeah.
opposed to spending time and my brain cells over and
Yeah.
over for what, $50 in a year? Like, you know what I mean? Uh,
Yeah.
and to Greg's point, Greg is saying for Americans spending on a Canadian card with the US dollar so strong and approaching almost 1.5, you're also earning almost 50% bonus points on that Canadian card, which is a
Yeah.
very, very good sort of argument for spending a little bit more on that Canadian card as and when you can,
Yeah.
depending on the card you have.
Yeah. Kevin and I think about that a lot when we're deciding who should pay for which things with which card. And
Right.
it depends, like the base earn rates of the cards matter, but the exchange rate also matters. And there are times where we say, actually, you should pay with the Canadian
Every,
card
yeah.
because we want those extra points. And even things like member transfers, like membership rewards, the US program and the Canadian program have different transfer partners, but we
Hmm.
both have Avios. I will never transfer my membership rewards to Avios because when
Right.
Kevin transfers them, they're like he's earned them on the Canadian dollar
Yep.
spending, whereas I've earned mine on the US dollar spending. And so it takes that level of maximization even one step further, which doesn't really help in reducing the mental overhead because it's one
I
more thing
mean,
you have to
in
analyze.
your case, it makes a little more sense to be able to do that kind of nuanced take is because you are doing this full time. Like that is what you're doing, and you will have to make those decisions. But to Heather's point and what I was trying to say, how many hoops would you jump for saving $5? Is basically where it
Yeah,
comes down to.
sometimes too many.
And that's it. And I'm not saying that everybody sort of grows, I mean, comes into this wise, but you kind of realize after doing it for a few years, you know what? If I have to pay 2.5% off $1,000 as foreign transfer fee, it's not worth me jumping the hoops of getting another card just to save up on that 2.5, because don't forget 2.5% off $1,000 is basically pittance, and your time is not worth that value.
Hmm.
Oftentimes, I'm not saying $25 is
Yeah,
not worth it, but oftentimes it's just not worth it.
yeah.
Um, Speaking of Canadian and US and the discrepancy amongst things, what are you and Kevin doing in terms of cell phone plans, SIM cards? Do you switch every country you go, or are you sticking to a particular eSIM service that has worked really well for you and are sticking to that?
We do different things. So
Okay.
I have Google Fi through the US, which used to be what I used primarily when I was traveling. But back, I think in early 2022, they said
Yeah,
you
6 months.
use it abroad, like we're shutting down your data service. But I still keep it at just the $20 a month line access fee to keep my number and to be able to get calls and text to like a real number, not a voice over IP
Are
solution.
are they still doing that 6 month mandatory, or is that just something on and off?
I don't know how strictly they're enforcing
Hmm.
it at this point, but I've never gone back to the US long enough that it works again abroad. And now I've gotten, so for my data, I use eSIMs now, and it's so
Yeah.
much less expensive. I'm almost kind of hitting myself for not doing it sooner, but I was always like, oh, it's so easy. It's so nice to just turn it on and it works. But now with Google Fi, I was paying $10 per gigabyte because I didn't
Hmm.
have the unlimited plan because I wasn't
Right.
using enough data to justify paying that much. Like it was cheaper to just do the per gigabyte. Now I probably don't spend more than $15 a month on average.
Hmm.
On my data. And I use a lot more data because it's so much less expensive. I recently found an eSIM provider that I'm really intrigued by, though. It's called
Hmm.
Roamless, and it's one eSIM, and it works in a bunch of different countries, 120, 140, something like this.
Yeah.
Um, and it's pay as you go. So if you use a
Hmm.
tenth of a gigabyte, you pay for a tenth of a gigabyte. And some of
Oh,
the rates
huh.
are really, really affordable. When I was in Paraguay, it was like $5 per gigabyte. And in a lot of Europe, it's $3 per gigabyte. So I
Right.
think at that rate, potentially and how depending on how fast you're moving, I'm really
Hmm.
intrigued by it. In Argentina, it's not a good deal though. It's about I think $18 per gigabyte here. So I just got a
Wow.
different eSIM. Um,
Right.
Kevin has a voice over IP service
Hmm.
for his Canadian number that he can receive calls and texts. And then he has a SIM card from Free Mobile in France, where I
Okay.
think is it 19.99 euro per month, and he gets 35 gigabytes of data across a
Nice.
large number of countries. So
Hmm.
it's nice for him because it just works in a bunch of different places, but he
Yeah.
he pays more, I think, for data than I do. I would have to add everything up to be sure of that, but I'm pretty sure he pays more than I do. And then sometimes it doesn't work. He says no, he doesn't pay more than I do. Sometimes we're in a country where Free Mobile doesn't have coverage, and it's pretty regional based. So sometimes we're in a region for multiple months where Free
Yeah.
Mobile doesn't have coverage, and so then he's having to do he says no. I'm lying.
Iyad has a question for Kevin. He's asking, how strict has Freedom been with his usage being primarily being in Canada? Oh, he's not in Canada though, Iyad. He is primarily outside of Canada.
Yeah, but he's primarily out of France, and it's
Right.
free mobile in France. He's not in France, and I don't think he's ever had any issues with free mobile saying like, oh, you have to use so much of your data or be so much of the year in France. Though there's
Right.
definitely nothing to say that that couldn't change someday in the future, just like with Google, it did.
Exactly.
They
Just like
used
with
to
Google
not
Fi.
care, and then they cared. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So that's what he's pointing out. That's what I mean, because Freedom has a policy that says you need to be primarily in Canada. I think you're confusing Freedom Mobile, Canadian Freedom Mobile with this French company, which is different one, right?
Yeah, free mobile is the French one.
Yeah, Free Mobile, not Freedom. Freedom, yeah, Freedom. I think there is a company here which is Freedom Mobile, Freedom or something. Okay, yeah. Uh, Yeah. So, and those are often ones. The one that has worked well for me, eSIM, and again, my way of using it is very limited. I basically use it maybe once a month when I'm traveling, is Saily, Saily, and it's worked really well for me.
Okay.
It's
I'm
decent.
not
They came
familiar
through
with
as an
that one.
affiliate thing, and I started using them, and it was consistent, hassle-free, kind of like what you mentioned, is available in like 160, 170 countries. But it's not pay as you go. I like that model a lot more because the cheapest I can buy is only 3 gigs in some places, or one
Okay.
gigabyte. Some places 1 gigabyte is
Yeah.
$3. Some places it's $4, depending on where you're going.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely check out Roamless. I just
hmm,
discovered it in Paraguay and just tested it for the first time in Paraguay because Kevin and I we were spending all of our time together there. Like I wasn't going out separately. So sometimes if he has coverage and we know we're going to always be together, I won't get a separate SIM card. So maybe it's cheating a little bit that I don't spend as much as him. Um, but uh Yeah, I flew here before him because he had some stuff to do for his residency. So I was like, for the airport, it would be good to just have a little bit of data.
hmm.
So I use this website called eSIMDB, like
Okay. Database. Yeah.
eSIM.databasedb, um, to compare all of the different eSIM options.
Hmm.
It allows
Cool.
you type in the country you need it for, and then you can filter like how many gigabytes you need, how long you need it to be valid for. So I usually will just put in my requirements for wherever I am, and then I'll pick the cheapest option. So
Hmm.
I've tried a lot of the different eSIM providers over the course of the past couple of years, like
Right.
Airalo and Nomad and like MobiMatter, and just because I'm always picking the cheapest one. And definitely some are better than others, but I haven't done a good job of keeping track which ones are more annoying. But I'm really, really intrigued by Roamless for people who are, not spending more than 1 to 2+ weeks in the same country.
Hmm.
And for people who just like don't want to deal with the extra hassle because it is annoying and it's like one of those things that I do where I'm maybe only saving $5 or $10, but I'm jumping
Yeah.
through some extra hoops. So I think Roamless seems like a really cool solution, and it connected very quickly in Paraguay. I know sometimes in the past I've had to fight a little bit with my eSIM to get it to actually work, and that
Yeah.
didn't happen. Was I just lucky that one time? Maybe. So I'll definitely continue testing it, but I love the concept behind it.
Yeah, for sure. I think the only time it gave me a little bit of grief is when I had forgotten to activate my plan before I got into the country. And
Mm.
that was the only time it didn't work. But now I've just, out of habit, I just activate the plan before my flight takes off. And then as soon as you land, it sort of kicks in.
Hmm.
We are actually now seeing something interesting happening in Canada with that is for the first time, we are seeing an eSIM provider becoming part of a credit card system through
Mm.
MasterCard and GigSky. This is a new company out of the US. It's a Silicon Valley company called GigSky,
Mm.
GIGSKY. And they have just introduced a partnership with, I think, MasterCard. Like if you look up GigSky MasterCard, and they have now
Mm.
just entered. So if you have a MasterCard, you can sign up for GigSky for a limited amount of time. It'll be free or included. And then beyond that, you can sort of on the go start paying over and above. But if you have a MasterCard, you can register with them. And I think the first 5 gigs or something like that is sort of covered for you through that MasterCard.
Mm.
Um,
Interesting.
oh, look, Milesopedia wrote something about it. Nice. So I want to close this one out. Fully aware of your time, and we did not commit to more than an hour and a half. But tell us a little bit about sort of what's happening in 2025, what's coming up for you, and where do we catch most of your developments other than Instagram?
Um, Instagram is the best place to keep up with what I'm up to. I have lots of ideas of things that I want to work on over the next couple of months, but
We haven't
nothing
even
is
spoken
a
about
sure
your
thing.
travel company. You also run a little travel company where you
I wouldn't,
know?
yeah. I mean, I did a trip last year as kind of a trial run, and it
Yeah.
was fun, and I think I'll do a couple more, but
Was that the
um,
Mali, Mauritania one, or am I
just Mauritania.
just Mauritania? Yeah, I
Yeah, just
saw
Mauritania.
that on the thing, and I was like, oh, maybe she does run a travel booking company, which is fantastic,
Yeah.
exciting.
It's kind of one of those ideas I'm playing around with. That's kind of what my plans are for a lot of this year is just try to play around with a couple of these ideas that I have and see if
Hmm.
I really enjoy any of them, or if I want to do a couple of different things part-time, or if really find something new and exciting that I want to work on and build that up a bit more. But Instagram is the place I'm the most active, and so anything I decide to do for sure. I'll talk about there. If I launch any other group
Perfect.
trips, I'll post about it there. Um, I've been thinking about restarting my newsletter, so if I end up doing that, I'll post about it there. But nothing is, I'm not sure yet. Like I have lots of ideas, and I like my job still, but I feel like I've been doing it for a while, and so I'm looking for something to spice things up, and I just don't know
Hmm.
what exactly that looks like just yet. But in terms of the rest of the year, we'll be in South America until the end of April. Um, we're here in Buenos Aires. We're going to go to Brazil and Paraguay, Uruguay, and then come back to Argentina for another month in Bariloche, the northern part of Patagonia. And then Kevin and I decided we're not going home in the winter anymore for at least a while. So we're switching to go back in the summer. He's from Quebec. I'm from Michigan. These are not some nice places to visit in the winter. I mean, they're like, it's pretty. The snow is nice
Yeah,
for 1 or 2 days, but
I was going
we're
to say for a
usually,
little while it's
yeah,
nice.
we're usually home with my family for about 3 weeks and then his family for about 3 weeks. So why would we choose to do that in December and January? Like that is crazy. So we're switching to going back in the summer. This year we'll be back like early May till mid-June. And then we'll head to Europe. We'll be in Bonsko for 2 months, which is the longest I'll have stayed anywhere in all of
Hmm.
these years of travel, except for during the pandemic where we couldn't really easily go anywhere.
Yeah.
So that will be interesting. I'm like kind of excited because it feels like it will be nice and relaxing, but I also wonder if I'll be feeling antsy at the end of that. And then Kevin, that's when Kevin will plan the surprise trip. So whatever we're doing for that. And then one of the things I'm most excited about for this year is that we're going to spend a month in northern Italy.
Hmm.
I've just gone through the process to claim Italian citizenship through my great grandparents who moved to the US
Oh,
from
that's
Italy.
amazing.
So it will be the first time I get to visit Italy as an Italian. I don't have my passport yet. We're still waiting for all of the paperwork to finish processing. But officially I'm Italian. So
Yeah.
it'll be really awesome to spend that time there. And we're going back to the town that my great grandmother, who we claimed the citizenship through, is
Hmm.
from, which is just going to be really cool, I
Oh,
think.
that's
And
super awesome.
yeah, so that's probably the thing I'm the most excited about this year. And then we expect to finish up the year, like Q4, in the Middle East. But that's all, it's very tentative at this point. So we want to visit some new
Fun.
countries and go back to some places that we like or that I've been and Kevin hasn't been. But nothing is set in stone for that part of the year yet.
Your Italy story reminds me of very close friends, Katrina and Andrew. They did the same thing and they moved to Italy, which they thought was going to be sort of a few years and then they'll up and leave, but they loved it so much. They've been there for about 7 years now.
Yeah,
She
that's
lives in
awesome.
Modena now, and that's
Okay.
where her is- ancestral family home or something, that connection that you have to claim your citizenship. She went through
Hmm.
that entire process. Andrew became part of that as the husband and sort of gotten his citizenship through that. Yeah, just and she loves it so much. She's just been there, and yeah,
Yeah, Italy is a
nice.
great place. There's so much good food there and it's so beautiful. So I'm
Yeah,
excited to spend some
I've
more
only
time
seen it
there.
through her Instagram, and it just seems amazing what you're able to do. Nothing flashy, but just like really nice, grounded, earthy lifestyle, which is so much nicer than, say, the flash and the bling of certain places.
Yeah.
Well, Caroline, thank you so much for taking all this while to chat about everything. I promise I had so much more to ask you, but I'm sure we'll pull you in again in the next few months to talk a
Yeah.
little bit more about
Let
where
me
your
know.
adventures have taken you. But until then, I wish you all the best, wish Kevin all the best. Tell Kevin I'm going to come and hound him in the next few weeks to see if he can
Okay.
give up some of his time for this community. But thank you so much again. I really
Yeah.
appreciate your time and
Thank you
you.
for having me. It was super fun. It's always a pleasure to talk about points and miles with other people who are as weirdly passionate about this subject.